Hey, it's Huck. And I figured since so many of you have been commenting on the dark glasses I've been wearing in some of my recent videos, I'd give you something to talk about this time. Okay, so how many of you out there were shocked to learn that some gun nut down south sent ricin-laced letters to the President of the United States and to New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg? About as surprised, I guess, as you were to hear Wayne LaPierre at the recent NRA convention yell to the crowd, "Hey, screw the law! Gun owners are never going to give up their guns, and regardless of whatever assault weapons or high-capacity magazine accessories the federal government may ultimately ban, they're keeping them." Or the gun nut that is calling on gun owners everywhere to march with their weapons onto the grounds of each of the 50 state capitals to demand that their state sever all ties with the Union. And then there's the thousands upon thousands of gun nuts behind the scenes. Some who we only know by their profanity-laced rants and threats submitted anonymously to videos like this one all over YouTube. Now, I can only assume that they write letters to the editor, to newspapers across the country as well. But relatively few of them seem to make it to print. Now, I suspect because few of these folks seem to have mastered the spelling of any multi-syllable words, or the craft of composing a complete sentence. And what has these folks all up in arms, literally? The threat of the most watered-down piece of gun legislation our eunuch-like elected representatives in the House and Senate could possibly come up with. Now, I mention all of this only because I think there's no greater proof of the absolute need for really effective and universal background checks than the evidence we see today of just how deluded and unhinged some gun owners are. Without question, the very first thing we ought to do before allowing the sale of even one more gun of any type in this country is to first meticulously scrutinize the sanity and criminal background of current gun owners. Well, I am sure the vast majority would pass such a background check, just as most Americans with cars are licensed and insured. It's clear that thousands and thousands of gun owners, maybe tens of thousands or more, should not be entrusted with guns, or for that matter, scissors, and a space to run with them. But I would strongly urge we include in those background checks of current gun owners another group of folks equally in need of vetting. That group would be police officers, FBI agents, and other state and federal law enforcement officials entrusted with the use of firearms. Now, I have no doubt that the vast majority of these law enforcement folks, like the vast majority of gun owners in general, would have nothing to fear in a concerted effort to weed out the crazies among them. But, as we see almost daily in towns and cities across America, there is ample evidence that some folks who carry both a gun and a badge lack the temperament, the judgment, and the restraint required of possessing either. In Florida this week, police tackled and choked a 14-year-old black teen as he walked towards his mom on the beach for what officers said were looks he made at them. This boy, who was holding a puppy in his arms at the time, which apparently was injured during this assault, was charged with felony resisting arrest, among other charges. Typically, the officer's supervisors have characterized the incident as justified. Thank God the mom of this teen caught most of this on her cell phone camera, which in these cases tend to be the only way any real justice ever comes about. Also in Florida, the FBI is embroiled in its own gun use controversy. Now, there are a remarkably large number of folks who question the whole Boston Marathon bombing scenario and the idea that two Chechenian brothers living in Boston were behind that whole massacre. There were questions on just what exactly happened when the older brother was gunned down and allegedly struck by a vehicle driven by his younger brother. Questions of why officers on the scene first reported exchanging a barrage of gunfire with the younger brother hidden in a tarped boat in someone's backyard. A barrage filmed by a local television station which defied orders to stay away, only to admit later that the younger brother was apparently unarmed in the boat. Now, state and federal authorities are looking into the possibility that the older brother and an accomplice may have been responsible for this gruesome throat slashing of 3 young men in a Boston suburb months ago. The other suspect last week was being questioned by FBI agents down in Florida who say he was about to confess his involvement in this triple homicide when he was shot 7 times, including once in the back of the head. Now, trying to follow the FBI's story in all this has been like trying to keep your head above water while caught in a riptide in 20-foot waves. First, the suspect wielded a knife, the authorities said. Then, no, he was attempting to get to an old blunt-edged sword he had near a wall after tipping over a small table. Then, no, he picked up a long pipe, or maybe it was a broomstick. 7 bullets to the head and chest. You'd think they could get their stories straight. And while most legitimate news sources seem to suggest that all the overwhelming evidence seems to indicate that police and the FBI were barking up the right trees, it's no wonder gun nuts and conspiracy theorists mistrust their government when they see these cases so ineptly and abusively handled. Which brings me to the honor student in Chicago, who was shot 25 times by police this week, including 7 times in the back. And while the teen apparently was involved in a car chase and possessed a gun reportedly, witnesses at the scene say that rather than ever brandishing the weapon, he threw it away in full view of the police well before they began shooting. And these incidents are just the most recent, most publicized cases. But just about everyone I know, and I imagine most folks you know, can tell of similar incidents of police brutality and unjustified use of force, even deadly force. Perhaps you know of a similar case. If so, I'd like to hear it. But the bottom line is that these incidents, and worse, much worse, happen all too often all around America. And like the gun nuts who should never own a gun, these folks shouldn't either, let alone a badge. And compounding the problem in these cases is that police departments, state and federal agencies all too often set out to protect their own rather than the victims of their own department personnel. I suspect their cover-ups and denials are aimed at avoiding the exorbitant lawsuits that would arise if they admitted the truth of these cases. Since local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies are publicly funded, maybe one of the solutions to limiting the number of police incidents like these is to limit the financial reward through civil lawsuits, but upping the ante on criminal repercussions for those involved, including those higher-ups who cover up or work to deny what turns out to be true charges. Whatever the answer, it's clear, at least to me, that there are far too many people out there with guns who clearly shouldn't have them. And this includes folks who carry a badge. I say we start doing thorough mental health evaluations on every last one of them. That might be the most effective gun reform we'll ever see in this country. Thanks for watching. See you real soon on my other channel with a video about that crazy crackhead Canadian mayor. Seems now that Michelle Bachmann's leaving Congress, the far right in Canada is stepping up to help fill the bizarro gap. Thanks, Canada, but with folks like Cruz, Paul, Gomer, and Lee running around, we don't really need your help. Anyway, hope you tune in. See you next week.